treatment of those disorders. So we are going to study the discussion on Unit 4, that is miscellaneous pharmaceutical inorganic compounds. Now, what type of disorders and the agents we are going to cover in this topic are expectorants, emetics, hematinics, poison and the antidotes, and lastly, astringent. So these many miscellaneous diseases or disorders, along with what type of or which type of pharmaceutical inorganic compounds we are using for their treatment, this we will discuss. Now, first we will study basically most or majority of these compounds are of respiratory system, or majority of these compounds that are miscellaneous compounds, they are acting on the respiratory system. Now, before we move forward, we will discuss some of the parts of the respiratory system. So the respiratory system basically starts from the nostrils, followed by the nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, lung, then pleura, followed by the bronchi and bronchiole. So this will be the flow diagram of the airways which are passing from the nostrils to the bronchioles of the lungs. Now, when the system is working, that is carrying of these airways from nostrils to the bronchioles, there are some of the protective and relieving mechanisms are also going on. So the particles which are there in the airways, they are flowing from this mucor layer and they are trapped. If they are being an impurity or being an unwanted particles from the dust particles, so they are trapped within this mucus layer when they are inhaled. Now, followed by this mucus layer, there is presence of watery saline layer, which will allow the cilia to push mucus towards the pharynx. So this is an secretion of the protective mucus, which will push the mucus towards the pharynx. Now, there is presence of the ciliary muscles, which will carry forward or which will propagate the movement of these airways inside. Now, in order, if there is unwanted particle or unwanted substance, if it is inhaled, so there is presence of these goblet cells which will secrete a protective secretion, that is mucus. Then this is the nucleus of these columnary cells which are present and which are going to be ancillary muscles, and this is the basement of these cell membranes. So this is one of the small fraction of this respiratory system. Now, there are some of the common disease or disorders of the respiratory system. What are those respiratory diseases? Number one will be secretion of the sputum. Now, what is this sputum actually? This is a mucus production. Just now only we have seen that these type of muscles, that is goblet cell, will secrete mucus. Now this mucus, it gives up when the normal mucociliary clearance mechanism are overloaded by the excessive mucus production. So if there is presence of so many dust particles, that time there is a secretion of the or unwanted particles. So that time there is secretion of the mucus will be happening. So this gives up when the normal mucociliary clearance mechanism, it will removed out of our respiratory system through the secretion of mucus by the goblet cells of our respiratory system. So the sputum is nothing but it is normal mucociliary clearance mechanism which is overloaded by the excessive mucus production. So when it is a clearance mechanism in order to excessive secretion of the mucus in the respiratory system. Now, to remove the sputum and mucus from the respiratory tract, there is mechanism that is cough. Now, what is cough? It is a part of natural defense mechanism for clearing the air passage of foreign particle and excess mucus. Now, whenever we are inhaling excess dust particles or foreign particles, to remove this dust and foreign particles, our body or our respiratory system will synthesize mucus. And this excessive secretion of the mucus along with these dust particles, they are cleared out of our body. They are removed out of our body through the mechanism that is cough. So it is a part of natural defense mechanism for clearing the air passages of foreign particles which are inhaled along with the excessive amount of mucus which is secreted due to the clearance mechanism. Now, so in this way, if we are going to inhale so many dust particles, there will be an irritation. So there will be an inspiration of these dust particles inside our body, which will compress or which will stimulate the secretion of the mucus, secretion of the defense mechanism, stimulation of the defense mechanism. So this stimulated defense mechanism will synthesize excess amount of sputum, which is expulsive out of our body. Now, these are two common, that is cough and sputum. Now, another disorders or diseases of the respiratory system are breathlessness, unable to breathe. So, it is unpleasant, is an unawareness about the sensation of the breathing. So, that person unable to breathe out normally, then wheeze or wheezing. Now, what is this wheeze or wheezing? During inhalation and exhalation, uh, or inspiration or expiration, the intrathoracic airways are narrowed. See here, this is a normal airway or this is a normal air pipe of a person, and this is the narrowed air pipe of the deceased person. For example, asthmatic person. So this asthmatic person unable to breathe normally. So that time there will be a production of some noise, that is wheeze or wheezing. These type of disorder are known as wheeze or wheezing. So when intrathoracic airways are narrowed further, so there is reduction in the airway, which results into the disturbed expiration in the airway closure. So this is a diseased airway. So that person unable to expirate easily, normally. So the some type of noise is occurring there. That type of disease is known as wheeze or wheezing. Now, next one will be chest pain. So due to the infection of respiratory system, there will be an inflammation or malignant of the involvement pleura and the parietal. So due to the infection, so there is an inflammation of the lungs and respiratory tract. So there is pain in the chest, which which is also an respiratory disorder. In order to make relief or in order to treat those disorders or diseases, then the drugs used orally to stimulate the flow of respiratory tract secretion. So drug used orally to stimulate the flow of respiratory tract secretion. These are by using these ciliary motion could throw mucus towards the pharynx easily. So due to this, due to these type of formulations, the person can easily throw out the mucus secretions, dust particles, along with the excessive amount of mucus. So by using these formulations, there is increased amount of ciliary motion, which will throw mucus towards the pharynx easily, or in other words, increase ciliary motion. So these are the compounds which are there in the market, that are Benadryl, Ascoril, that is expectorants, which will increases the ciliary motion in order to remove the excess mucus secretion from the lungs through pharynx, removed out of our body. So it is used in the respiratory disorder in which respiratory secretions are infected. Respiratory secretions are not happening normally. Respiratory secretions are viscid or excess. So to treat these type of diseases, we are going to use a formulation or a compound that are expectorants. Now, these expectorants are basically divided into two categories. That is, drugs for the cough, they are directly acting expectorants and reflux acting expectorants. So expectorants are basically divided into two types: directly acting expectorants and reflux acting expectorants. Now, what is the meaning of the word directly acting expectorants? They act directly on the bronchial secretory cells. So these expectorants will directly act on the bronchial secretory cells, that is mucokinetics. So those are drugs which will act by directly on the directly on the bronchial secretory cells are also known as mucokinetics. And these drugs are basically terpene hydrate, sodium or potassium citrate, sodium or potassium acetate, potassium iodide, Vasaka, and gozifacin. So these are the drugs which will directly act on the cells which will synthesize bronchial secretions. Now the second action or second category of the compounds are reflux acting expectorants. Now what are those? They are acting by irritating the gastric mucosa. So they are going to irritate the gastric mucosa and then stimulate the respiratory tract secretions. So they are not acting directly on the bronchial cell which will secrete the mucus. They act by irritation mechanism. So first of all, they will irritate the gastric mucosa. Now due to the irritation of these mucosal cells, there will be a stimulation of the respiratory tract secretion. Those are also known as mucokinetics by acting by reflux acting mechanism. And here in this case, they are acting by the direct acting mechanism. Now the examples of the compounds which are coming under the reflux acting expectorants are ammonium chloride, ammonium carbonate, and potassium iodide. So others like iodinated glycerin. So these are the compounds which are acting by either directly acting expectorants. Next one, reflux acting expectorant. Another classes of the expectorants are mucolytic compounds that are bromhexine, ambroxol, acetylcysteine, and carbocysteine. Then the compounds that is antitussive, that antitussive are acting by suppressing the curb center centrally. Now they are directly acting on the central nervous system by suppressing the curb center. Now by suppression of the curb center, that means suppressing the secretion of the mucus by the goblet cells of the respiratory. Now there are another class of the compounds. They are opioids that are codeine and morphine. So directly acting by opioid analgesics mechanism. Those are codeine and morphine. The non-opioid expectorants are dextromethorphan and nascopine. The antihistaminics which are also act on the histamine receptor. Now what is histamine? Histamine is one of the secretion or one of the hormone of our body which is secreted due to allergic mechanism. Now we all know some patients are complaining that this is an allergic type of rhinitis, allergy sardi आहे ती. So this type of rhinitis, that time also there is increased secretion of the mucus from the goblet cells due to allergic mechanism. So that time due that allergic rhinitis will be treated by the compounds that are antihistaminics, and the examples of the compound which are acting by this mechanism are chlorpheniramine and diphenhydramine and promethazine. Now, pharyngeal demulcents, those are which will relieve the pharyngeal pain, which will stop the irritation of the pharynx. Those are pharyngeal emulsions, and the examples lozenges, glycerin, linctus containing syrups. So we all know that the generally cup syrups or the expectorants are sweet in nature. So they also act by pharyngeal demulcent mechanism that are lozenges, glycerin, linctuses containing syrups. Now the first compound from this expectorant category is ammonium chloride. Now what is this ammonium chloride? Basically it is a formula NH4Cl having molecular weight 53.49, colorless crystalline powder, having cool and saline taste. Basically it is hygroscopic and freely soluble in water. in the water as well as glycerin, but it is sparingly soluble in the alcohol, and it is also known as ammonium urate. This ammonium chloride is also known as ammonium urate. Now, the preparation of this ammonium chloride which is there in the market is by neutralization reaction. Now, evaporation to the dryness and purification by the recrystallization. So their preparation is by neutralization. Then assay method or assay procedure of these compounds in order to check their purity is weighed quantity which is dissolved in the water and formaldehyde solution is added, and it is the mixture is then titrated with 0.1 normal sodium hydroxide using phenolphthalein solution as an indicator. Now, the calculation factor for the percentage purity is 0.1 molar sodium hydroxide is equivalent to the 0.005349 grams of ammonium chloride. Now, the dose for this ammonium chloride is 4 to 12 gram daily orally. It is used as a mild diuretic, as an expectorant, a weight reducing agent, and a urine acidifying agent. It is also used as an urine acidifier. Now, this compound is also used in combination, used to control a cough associated with cold or other respiratory illness or respiratory diseases. And it is also used as an dietary supplements. Now, this is a formulation which will contain a combination of the compound that is diphenhydramine, antihistaminic, ammonium chloride that is expectorant acting direct by Dirichlet mechanism, and sodium citrate syrup. Now, the next compound from the expectorant category is potassium iodide having molecular weight 166 grams. Now, the description, it occurs as a colorless crystals or white granular powder having saline but slightly bitter taste. It is soluble in water, alcohol, and glycerin. Potassium iodide solution contains 10% of the potassium iodide, 10% of potassium iodide with 0.05% of sodium thiosulfate to reduce the free iodine, which can form on storage. So if we are going to store this potassium iodide for a longer period of time, it will release the free iodine, and that free iodine is nullified, it is neutralized by sodium thiosulfate. Now, the aqueous solution of potassium iodide dissolves iodine by forming a dark brown solution of potassium. So this is all about the potassium iodide. Now, the assay procedure of this potassium iodide is iodometry. Weighed amount of substance is dissolved in water and a concentrated hydrochloric acid, then chloroform and titrate with 0.05 molar potassium iodide until color of the chloroform layer iodine disappears. So this whatever amount of iodine is there which will be dissolved in this potassium iodide, and this chloroform layer is first of all titrated. This chloroform layer will contain iodine. Now at this stage, add start solution as an indicator and titrate the remaining solution to get the colorless solution. So this is the assay method, that is determination of purity method for the potassium iodide. Now the taste for iodine depends on the liberation of iodine on the acidification. Being a strong oxidizing agent, potassium iodide liberate iodine from the potassium iodide liberate chlorine from the concentrated hydrochloric acid. Now the solution turns brown. Addition to further iodide, it fades as the iodine is converted into pale colored iodine monochloride. So when this procedure will be happening, iodine will react with the chlorine to form iodine monochloride. Now, this potassium iodide is used as an expectorant as well as a source of iodine. Now, the second disease or disorder associated with the respiratory system is emetics. Now, emetics, that means compound used in the emesis. Emesis is nothing but vomiting. Now, what is vomiting? It serves to be relieve the gastrointestinal tract. It serves to be relieve the upper gastrointestinal tract by forcible expulsion of the gastric content to the mouth. Now, what is emesis? Emesis is nothing but vomiting, which will be serves to relieve the upper GI by forceful expulsion of the gastric content to the mouth. Now, nausea, it is an unpleasant sensation and it is generally associated with the vomiting. Before vomiting, what type of sensation that is will be happening or it is feel by that person? It is vomiting. And the emetics are the drugs or the compound which induces vomiting. That means emesis induced coronary compounds is known as emetics. So plays an important role in the treatment of poisoning. If the person is undergoes suicidal attempt or poisoning situation, so with the help of inducing vomiting, we can remove out this poison from the person's body. Now, these drugs act either by irritation or gastric mucosa directly on the vomiting center, that is chemoreceptor trigger zone. That is CTZ is the center which is situated on the medulla oblongata, and these drugs will directly off on this center, that is chemoreceptor trigger zone center, to stop vomiting. Now, they are coming under the category of centrally acting emetics. Now, emetics versus preparations. Now, we all have just discussed that emetic is the treatment. Emetics are the compounds used to remove the poisoning situation, or that this is during also acidity problem will be results in also vomiting. Now, when we are going to compare the emetics with the preparation, in low doses added in anti-cup preparation. So emetics are in low doses, they are added in anti-cup preparation, mild, which will stimulate the respiratory tract secretion. And the examples of the compound coming under the emetics category are copper sulfate and sodium potassium tartarate. Now, what are those compounds which are coming under this class? First will be sodium potassium tartarate. Now, the API limit or the purity limit of the sodium potassium tartarate is 99 to 102%, which is calculated on the anhydrous basis. Now, preparation, it is prepared by boiling a solution of sodium carbonate and potassium bicarbonate for some time and allowing the reaction mixture to stand for 60 minutes, 60 degrees centigrade. Now, then the solution is filtered out and concentrated and crystallized out. Now, this is basically a blue-white crystalline powder with a saline test and soluble in water and slightly soluble in the alcohol, which is melts basically at 75 degrees centigrade. Now, the directions for the use of the sodium potassium tartarate is given. It is used in the medicine as mild expectorant, emetic, and purgative. It is going to be have also action on the purgative mechanism. It is an ingredient of the Fehling solution. Now, what is this Fehling solution? Fehling solution are the basically solutions which are used in the identification of the carbohydrate. So, the sodium potassium tartarate reagent, it is basically present in that reagent which is used to identify the carbohydrate. It is also used in the silvering mirror, also used in the it is also used in the piezoelectric devices, for example, crystal microphones and phonogram pickup cartridge. So these are basically present in the phonograms as well as in the Fehling solution. Now our next compound, which is also used as an emetic agent, is copper sulfate. Now description, it is basically blue crystalline powder soluble in water, glycerine and insoluble in the alcohol. On heating at 2 to 30 degrees centigrade, it gives white anhydrous copper sulfate, which is very hygroscopic and turns blue by absorption of the water. So if it is anhydrous, it is white in color. If it is going to absorb the water, it is blue in color. So this test may be used as a test for the presence of small amount of water. If it will contain the blue color, then it is containing an hydrated situation. And if it is a white powder, then it is anhydrous or anhydrous. Now the uses of this copper sulfate, it is used as an emetic in the dose of 300 milligrams. It is also used as an astringent in the dose of 5 to 10 milligrams 3 times a day. So the agents which are used as an emetics are copper sulfate and sodium potassium tartrate. Now the method of analysis of this copper sulfate, it is by basically iodometric titration method, in which the copper sulfate will react with the potassium iodide to give unstable cupric iodide, and which decompose on cupric iodide with a liberation of the free iodine. And this liberated iodine is then back titrated with the sodium thiosulfate using starch solution as an indicator. So first of all, there is a reaction between copper sulfate and potassium iodide to form free iodine. And this free iodine is titrated with sodium thiosulfate and sodium thiosulfate by using starch solution as an indicator. Now the procedure for the titration is potassium iodide is mixed with water and acetic acid, then titrate with 0.1 normal sodium thiosulfate using starch solution as an indicator. Now faint blue color, that is 2 gram of potassium thiosulfate, titrate till the blue color disappears. Now the factor calculation for the calculation of purity of the copper sulfate is 0.1 normal sodium thiosulfate is equivalent to the 0.02497 grams of the copper sulfate. Now for preparation, if we are synthesizing copper sulfate, that is whenever there is reaction between the copper oxide and sulfuric acid, where we can synthesize copper sulfate and water molecule. Now heat the sulfuric acid until it is almost boiling. Now add a small amount of the copper oxide to the hot acid solution of sulfuric acid. Now use the glass stirring rod to stir lightly after each new addition of the copper oxide. So we are going to add this copper oxide in the sulfuric acid solution with a continuous stirring. Now continue to heat the solution after the last piece of copper oxide has been added. Till when we are going to add until all amount of copper oxide, we have to stir that solution. This may take 1 to 2 minutes and the solution will look dark blackish blue color. That means there is synthesis of copper sulfate will be happening. Now set the beaker aside to cool at room temperature and filter the solution set aside in a warm place for the evaporation after a few days or weeks. We are going to collect the crystals of copper sulfate. Now the next category of the compounds, those are astringents. These are the agents which are applied locally and gives protein precipitation action. Now we all know that is alum, turti. This is an household astringent used to stop the bleeding, used to stop the protein precipitation. So by which mechanism they are acting as an astringent? They cause the contraction and wrinkling of the tissue. They will contract the blood vessel, they will contract the tissue, they will contract the cell in order to stop the bleeding. They will reduce the cell permeability, constrict the local blood vessel and inhibit the trans capillary movement of the plasma proteins. So they will act by the cleansing mechanism. The net effects of use of astringent, or for what purpose we are going to use the astringents, are they going to have the anti-inflammatory effect by decreasing the blood supply to the site of the injury. See, alum is an example of astringent. So they will constrict or they will reduce the blood supply to those tissues. That's why there is a decreasing in the inflammation, that is anti-inflammatory. Decrease blood loss. Continuously or immediately they will clot the blood by constricting the blood vessels. So they are acting by the coagulation of the plasma proteins. Now it is also used as an antiperspirant effect by decreasing the secretion of the sweating, thereby decrease the size of pores on the skin. So if any person will be suffering from too much sweating defect, so that sweating defect or secretion of the sweat can be reduced by using astringent. And the next will be antimicrobial agent. It acts by the agent that is antimicrobial also by protein precipitation reaction. So they are going to be precipitate out the protein which is there in the microbial cell. So these astringent will be acting by different mechanisms. Those are, they may act as an anti-inflammatory, they may decrease the blood loss, they may act as an antiperspirant, as well as they are acting as an antimicrobial. Now, mechanism of this protein precipitation by the use of astringents though are, that is, for example, protein precipitation of the skin. But skin is going to contain lipid and protein. Now, what are proteins? Proteins are nothing but a different amino acid joined together with the help of peptide bonds. Now, the atom which are capable to form the metallic bonds, that is chelation of the metal ion with the groups. Now, these astringent molecules will form a complex with these protein molecules, and to stop their working, they will act by these anti-inflammatory, anti-spurpirant mechanism by forming a complex with the protein molecule. See here, these astringent molecules will form a complex with this astringent molecules. They are acting as an anti-inflammatory, anti-spurpirant, and antimicrobial agent. Now, some of the uses of these astringent molecules are, they are going to reduce the pain by anti-inflammatory action. They arrest hemorrhage. They will stop the blood loss or hemorrhage which is happening. They will promote the healing of the wound, and by acting as an antimicrobial and antipathogenic action. And they will also reduce, or they will reduce the sweat mechanism. So these are some of the uses of these astringent molecules. And the examples of the compound which are coming under this category are zinc oxide, zinc sulfate, calamine, zinc chloride, aluminum sulfide, aluminum chloride, and last but not the least, alum, which is to be used as an astringent. Now, a compound that is zinc sulfate, properties, the physical properties, it is colorless crystals and efflorescent in the dry air, odorless and water soluble. Aqueous solution is acidic in nature. Now, the chemical properties which are associated with these astringent molecules are loss of water for the crystallization at boiling and water temperature. So when we are going to boil or when we are going to heat this zinc sulfate, it will form different unhydrated or different dehydration products of this zinc sulfate. Now, decomposition at higher temperature, if we are going to heat this zinc sulfate for prolonged period of time at 800 degrees centigrade, so they will again synthesize zinc oxide. Now, the assay principle for the zinc oxide compound is, the assay limit or assay principle will be done by the complexometric titration, because this zinc sulfate containing zinc metal ion will form a complex with the they are going to form a complex with the EDTA molecule and acting by using an indicator, that is iriochrome black. So for the factor for the calculation of percentage purity is each ml of 0.05 molar complexing agent, that is disodium EDTA, will be equivalent to the 0.01438 grams of zinc sulfate. So this zinc sulfate will be used as an astringent, will be used as an zinc supplement. It is also used as an emetic and it is also used as an antiseptic. Now, meanwhile, for the used which is to be used as an astringent is alum. It is also known as in Marathi it is turti. So it is also known as potassium aluminium sulfate. That is colorless transparent crystals, water soluble, gives acidic solution, and it is insoluble in the alcohol. When we are going to dehydrate this alum at high temperature, there is formation of an anhydrous alum will be happening. So in the lab, we are going to synthesize this alum by using hot concentrated solution of potassium sulfate and a hot solution of the aluminum sulfate. They are mixed together in the presence of water. So there will be a formation of alum will be takes place. The principle of determination of percentage purity is by a gravimetric method. That is,